Sam, welcome to the show.
Hi.
And thank you for agreeing to come and share your thoughts with me on data-driven ways of working and data in organisations.
Pleasure to be here.
So you're a data expert and an expert in AI.
Apparently so.
Correct. And I know you've rolled out data competence and data-driven ways of working in large and small organisations. So my first question is going to be, what is the role of data and big data in organisations today?
Sure. So I think it's a great question. I think the simplest way of answering it, I'd say, is data's role is to provide visibility into situations, to give that visibility to people to make informed decisions on what they should be doing. So data really provides the visibility into what happened, potentially why it was happening, in what circumstances it happened, with context, et cetera, et cetera. And this really is what we call data-driven decisions. So through that visibility into what has happened, I can get the right information to the right person in the right time, in the right context, and enable them to make sort of these informed evidence-based decisions throughout the whole organization. So, we're not talking about a select few people. We're really talking about anyone within that business can make, a decision within HR, a decision within operations, a decision in product, a decision in strategy, can make those decisions.
So it's basically giving them insight they didn't have before.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And what does that change for them then? And at a strategic level, but also at an operational level?
I think the key thing is to sort of, first off, to understand why this change has happened. So the real driving force is the fact that, first off, it's financially possible because data storage is a lot cheaper now. Data processing is we're talking exponential reduction in cost. The technologies are there to be able to achieve that, and the skills are there. The problem's been de-skilled a lot. It's a lot easier to sort of implement these things, and people can find that skills. So first off, it's now for the first time very possible for large organizations to be able to do this.
And very affordable, if I understand.
Very affordable. 20 years ago, not really possible. It would have cost so much money to actually do this, and the skills we would have to have hired university professors to be able to sort of get to this stage from a technology point of view. And I think now today, it is very possible, but 20 years ago it's not. So 20 years ago you have this situation where you are kind of like, you have this experience-based gut feeling decision-making process where a select few of people are sort of collecting information from an organization that's rolling up, presentations, spreadsheets, this kind of stuff. And they're making these informed decisions mainly based on their own personal experience and gut feeling, which is not a bad way to do it, but it's inefficient because you have, two people making decisions from an organization of about 30. So it's
done manually
in
terms of data.
Very, very manually done.
So it's subject to human error.
Subject to human error, bespoke every time. You have to repeat it. It's very manual process. And today, a lot of that collection and organization process is no longer needed. And really the decision making can be pushed further down into the organization. So, people who are a lot closer to the action are able to make the decisions by themselves in a trust-based organization. And it's much more feasible. So, the experts at the top can still make high-level strategic decisions, but they don't need to make all the decisions. Like product decisions can be made by product managers, not by chief product officers, and this kind of stuff. And so, from a technology point of view, it's changed for sure. It's cheaper and all that kind of stuff. But the real complex part is the change in the organization that needs to happen to accompany it. You need to empower the guys who are making the decision. You need to, relinquish a little bit of the control over the decision-making process and kind of stuff like that. So that's the real big change.
I mean, that's a big change in leadership style and leadership models, isn't it? So I hear a lot about leaders need to be more data savvy, which, yes. What do you think are the non-negotiables that those leaders need to understand to be able to manage that environment?
Yeah, great question. I think... So when I was preparing a bit, I had quite a few on my list of non-negotiables, but I thought it'd be simple and just keep it to 3. I think the first one is like a true understanding of what a data-driven decision is and what it is strictly not.
So what is it?
Very good question. So it is, using evidence through, data that's being provided, information, you consume that evidence, and then you also combine that with your own experience and your own knowledge, and you make an informed decision based on what is presented to you in front of you. It's very important that it's not just doing exactly what the computer tells you to do. That's definitely not what a data-driven decision is. It's not saying the graph's pointing up, therefore let's go up kind of thing. That's not what a data-driven is. And secondly, and probably more dangerously, because it's kind of these data-driven decisions that are masquerading sort of data-driven decisions, we say. They're pseudo-data-driven decisions.
Pretending to be data decisions.
Exactly. And these ones are ones where people say, I've essentially made a decision already, and now I need to go and look for the evidence to prove it. Okay. And you can see, like, there's a guy in the White House right now that's kind of doing that, saying, well, I won the election, and now let's go find the charts that prove it. And you can quite see how this is a problem, but it's actually very common. You'll find in organizations if you're not careful. So that's the first point. The second point is a strong data foundation. Yeah. So people are attracted to the sexy end of data science.
Which is what, if I may?
If there is a sexy end of data science. So that is the visualization, the graphs, the algorithms, the AI end, the machine learning end. They're quite attracted to that end, but they're not focused on sort of like all the hard work that needs to go in on the downstream of that, which is solid data collection, data quality, data governance, data engineering, this kind of aspects, which is so important, not sexy, not directly valuable, but indirectly incredibly valuable because they enable everything upstream. Okay. And you can't do the sexy stuff without nailing that first bit. And the important thing to remember there is that the good data is always better than good algorithms, full stop. And I'd say the last non-negotiable, the third one is the strong data culture. So nailing the data culture, which is beyond just the data science team, the data team, is company-wide, is that data-driven culture where you're curious about why something's happening. So you're looking at what's in front of you, you're looking at the evidence, and you think, okay, why is this happening? What other information can I collect to sort of expand my knowledge of this thing? You're skeptical about the results. You then go back and think, okay, I can collect this information, I can integrate it this way, and you start to build this virtuous cycle. And if you've nailed that and you've empowered your employees to be able to do that and to make the decisions on what they see, the rest kind of falls into place quite nicely, because you have a sort of a market, a need pulling the sort of the technical organization to set that up. Okay. So those are my three.
So they need to understand the data, what's in it, have good data. They need to understand data-driven decision-making.
Exactly.
And they need to understand the culture.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that sounds like quite a lot of new skills. What do you think? I mean, there are hard and soft skills to that, of course.
Of course, yeah.
What do you think is the biggest challenge in terms of bringing those new skills in for leaders particularly?
So I think, first off, we talk about the hard skills that you need to bring in, so the core technical skills. I think what's really interesting, so I'll just look at the data skills. There are also lots of digital skills like cloud and all this kind of fun stuff. But let's just look around the stuff around data. I think what's really interesting is, first off, I once again go back 20 years. There was one profile that would do this, and they were called a data scientist or maybe a data engineer, depending on how you were looking at it. And today, within the data space, you've got data scientist, data analyst, analytics engineer, machine learning engineer, deep learning engineer. You see this proliferation of profiles, which I see as a very positive thing, because it means it's being adopted. It means people are making it their own, and they're progressing it, and it's specializing. So this I think is a really good thing. So I can't say exactly that you need 20 data scientists.
No, but it's interesting to see how much it's evolved. Yeah.
But certainly anything within the sort of data engineering, data science, analytics space, those are very core competencies, and in your own organization, you'll know which ones you need and to really focus on. But really, from a technical point of view, the challenge of deploying those skills is an interesting one, because it's a moving target, because the skills that he needed 4 years ago in this space have changed.
Yeah, of course.
So I think, speaking from experience of when we did this at Airbus, the challenge was you need to deploy 700 data analysts in 2 years. And they don't exist today. At that point, we had no official data scientists or analysts that we knew of. We did actually have some. And they need to be within their business units, within their teams, where they are today, because we need to combine domain knowledge and data analytics skills. So the traditional approach is to go for a classroom training. which you do what you go to a university and you say, can you provide a classroom training on data analytics and competence? And you quite quickly realize that, it's not going to be ready in time. And by the time you actually get all this classroom stuff together, it's, a year too late, and you haven't got the, the physical rooms to do it. And it very quickly gets expensive, and it's not going to hit 700 people in 2 years. So with the advent of MOOCs and online trainings, it was super responsive. We could very quickly deploy the skills or get the content to the people very quickly. So I think the first element was this, very scalable solution in online trainings and MOOCs, but they don't come without their own challenges. So I think I'm guessing here, but the pass rate of classroom training is probably, for the people that actually attend, but the pass rate for classroom trainings is probably about 80-90%. In the consumer space for MOOCs, it's 7%.
Wow.
So that's the gap that we're talking about. Obviously, within companies, it's a bit different. So you're not faced with the same challenge with the classroom training as you are with an online training. So the real key thing was that all that agility that we were getting from online training came at a price that retention rates and pass rates were a lot lower. So we really focused on saying, well, we're just going to get started, and we're going to have a feedback loop coming from our guys who are training, and they're going to tell us why it's working, why it's not working. So for example, we found that some people, when they went through the first wave, they said, the level's too high, I wasn't ready for this. So we added an entry level test to make sure that you were ready, but we also provided a training course to train you how to get to that level. We found that people were saying, I don't have someone to talk to directly, I just have a video and I don't know how to do. So we really invested in sort of community training, putting people in the same room, coaching each other, learning from each other. We found that managers weren't allowing their guys to train, and they were sort of eating up all their time. So we lobbied managers to try and senior managers to really allow their guys to do it. So I think if you're trying to follow this kind of process and put in training, don't just take those three things and do them, but just really focus on that feedback loop, learn from what your people are saying, get started, get going. And, we moved from a 50% pass rate to a 70% pass rate because we were listening to what the guys were saying.
So you're basically in an agile loop of sort of the leading startup, build, measure, learn triangle or cycle, should I say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which just, time is running, but I just want to touch this last point because I think it's really important. It's your third non-negotiable around data culture.
Sure.
Because I think the cultural element of that is really important. And I can't speak to you without asking you my favorite question of how does data and data-driven ways of working contribute to a more inclusive environment? Because if I look at the data culture, it's more collaborative, it's a learning culture. So how can we get data to help us make a more inclusive environment?
I think it's a super question, and by no means am I an expert on the subject. So, and there's a lot of people out there talking with a lot of.
But I would love your opinion.
Sure. So first off, a data-driven environment is by its nature very inclusive. You have to have a variety of opinions. You have to have that skepticism, and you have to sort of dig into the data and have those people that are inclusive. I would say using data to become more inclusive is quite a pitfall if you're not careful as well, though. Okay. So
why is it a pitfall?
I think so first off, if we imagine say for example you have to first realize that your data is in itself biased. So by its nature your data is biased, because if we just look at, say for example, at people data, all of the data that you have in terms of people are purely based on the people that have been in your company. So that in itself is a biased data set compared to general population of people.
It's a picture of the existing people.
Exactly.
Okay.
And past people,
yeah.
Obviously. So if you're trying to push to a more inclusive environment in itself, you need to make sure that the people who are in the loop, the people who are making human decisions, that humans are making human decisions, should we say that. So the first thing is that your data is biased, and there's unconscious biases, and also that your algorithms are not robust enough to perform, to make these kinds of decisions. So an example is, if you want to say, let's train an algorithm that's going to help me screen CVs. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to, collect all the CVs of all the people that I've joined this company in the last 20 years. All that's going to do is going to predict that the people are the exact people that you've already got in that situation. So you already have if you're trying to move away from your existing situation to a more inclusive situation, your data will just propagate the existing situation if you're not careful. Okay,
so you have to be aware of that. It's not just going to tell you what it thinks is right.
And so data in itself is purely like a shadow of events that have happened or a culture. So when it comes to people's data, it's a shadow of a culture that was in place. Okay. And so I do think it's important to dig into that data and observe what were the biases that we were looking into and why was that happening. But I think it's very sort of, it's a wrong decision to then make those targets, to then say, we're now going to use them to be targets of things we fulfill, because you'll end up tackling the target and not addressing the culture, which is the underlying problem. So you're really trying to solve a culture, and you have these indicators of what that culture is really like. And if you just focus on the metrics, which is the output of the culture, then you'll just solve the metrics and you won't solve the underlying culture.
So we should be using those data points and those outputs as insight.
Definitely look at it as insight. Definitely look at it as almost like an auditing method, but don't use it as input to sort of to try and target, this is what we need to get.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that input. And just as a last question, do you have a last piece of advice for any leaders looking to get more data savvy?
I think just get your hands on some stuff. I think especially with things like AI algorithms and stuff like this, there's a big hype around them.
You mean the sexy part?
The sexy part of data science. I think a lot of people get attracted to that, and they kind of think of this world of AI algorithms being let's talking with a robot and that kind of stuff. And I think once you get past that that hype cycle, that's really when the interesting stuff gets started, because you get more involved in what does this actually do and what can it achieve. And once you hit that area, you're really going to hit the value of what this kind of stuff. So I would just actually say get involved. If you have data projects at your company already, look at them, get someone to talk through how it works, how the different blocks work, and really just have a few examples that you can sort of play around with.
Okay, so get involved and get curious.
Get curious, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.